and bedtimes and so on. So just as an FYI to folks who are joining us tonight, we would ask if you prefer not to have yourself on camera, you're welcome to turn it off. Got a great panel ahead of us, and so we'll get started momentarily. All right. Oh, and I'll just put a plug in. We are going to do our polling. For those of you who have been on NEHA webinars and chats recently, you know we do polling at the start. So if you don't already have a cell phone or a tablet close by, please grab that as we will be using it for tonight's chat. We'll give it just another minute and then we'll go ahead and get started. As we're waiting for folks to join, I just want to extend a big thanks to our panelists who are joining us tonight. We are so grateful for their time, and especially right before the school year starts. We know that they have a lot of things on their plates, and we really appreciate it. And we appreciate you all being on here as well. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and get started. I know that we had several more folks who are planning on joining us tonight who will hopefully trickle on. If not, as I mentioned earlier, we will be recording tonight's session so that folks who aren't able to join us will have a chance to watch this afterward. I want to get started first by introducing myself. My name is Sarah Shinkman, and I am NEHA's program director. I started working for NEHA about 5 months ago. I know most of you all who are on tonight's chat, and it's really great to see so many familiar faces. But welcome to anyone who may be new and who I haven't had a chance to meet yet. I will be your moderator for tonight's session. As we navigate the current healthcare crisis together, our primary concern is the health and wellness of the individuals and families we serve. Being connected with each other is more important now than ever. While we may be practicing physical distancing, staying healthy means not falling into an unhealthy pattern of social isolation. Our goal is to keep you as informed as possible, which is why we've continued to host webinars and chats like this one. Tonight's session is all about back to school for parents with kids of all ages. We've received a lot of feedback from families asking for us to do a session on this topic, and we're really excited to be able to deliver it tonight. Our panel of experts will guide a conversation around helping families transitioning to a new learning environment. Our objective is to give you a space to ask questions and connect with others facing similar changes and challenges. The information provided is not intended to be medical advice. Please contact your healthcare provider or HTC for information related to your bleeding disorder or other healthcare concerns. We are thrilled to welcome our panelists on tonight's session. Each one of them will introduce themselves and share a little bit more on their background shortly, but I do just want to give a quick shout out to those who are joining us as our speakers. We have Kathy Cisnero, who is not only a member of the NEHA community, but she is also a school psychologist. And we're so grateful to have her as a wonderful resource. And I want to put a plug in that Kathy is the current New Hampshire School Psychologist of the Year. So thanks, Kathy, for joining us. And Kathy also shared several resources that we'll be sending out to everyone who attends tonight's webinar as a follow-up to the session. So huge thanks to Kathy for that. Next, we have Ian Riddle, who is a school nurse and who works alongside Kathy at an elementary school in New Hampshire. And Kathy very kindly suggested Ian to help us with tonight's session. Ian is new to our community, and we're really thrilled to have him. I'm just going to tell you, Ian, that as soon as you do one presentation, you'll be officially a part of our Wicked Strong family. So I
Awesome.
hope that you'll join us again. And we haven't even done the session, but Chris Packard is another presenter for tonight's forum. Again, another familiar face in the NEHA community. Chris is a high school teacher in Maine, and Chris, as well as Kathy, have spoken on previous back to school forums, sharing their expertise on 504 plans and IEPs, which I know are another important topic for our community. We are so appreciative of our speakers' time. As I said, school is quickly approaching, and they too have a lot on their plate, so thank you all. We'll have each of our speakers talk for about 10 minutes or so at the start of the presentation and share information from their different perspectives. And then following their talks, we will open it up to a Q&A. Before we get started, I just want to share a few reminders. Tonight's presentation should be about an hour or so, and Rich will be moderating the chat. So if you have questions, we ask that you please submit them into the chat and we will read them aloud. We'll do our best to get to all of the questions. Many of you also submitted questions prior to tonight's presentation, so we will plan to share those as well. If for whatever reason we aren't able to get to your question tonight, we'll do our best to help facilitate a response in the future. We hope that this session is helpful to you, and as I said, if there's something that you have further questions about, we'll share a resource guide to accompany the presentation. And if you have any issues with Zoom, feel free to reach out to Rich directly through private message. We have all become tech gurus in addition to the other hats that we wear, and I'm sure we'll be able to help troubleshoot as best as possible. So before we get started, as I mentioned, we are going to do some quick polling to just gauge the audience and where folks are at in terms of your experience, as well as kind of what your understanding of your school system is as you navigate this new normal that we're experiencing. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and I will pop up our polling. And if you don't already, please have your cell phone, please grab that and text the number 781-412-7971. And you can respond to the question, what is or was your favorite subject in school? So our options are number one, math, science, or excuse me, number one, math, 2, science, 3, English language arts, 4, art, 5 is language, foreign language class, 6, civics or government. I see that lunch and recess is already getting some popularity here. And then last but not least, other, if there is another subject in school that you prefer. So please go ahead and respond to that. We'll take a minute just to allow people to answer the question, and then we'll move on to our next one. So it looks like, oh, I see most of the other ones are now starting to get some likes as well.
Wow, well distributed.
I know. I like that lunch and recess is still maintaining some strong ground here. And also math. That's great. And thank you all for participating in this. Just so folks are aware, all the survey information that you submit to us through this is anonymous. So we appreciate people participating in it. It helps us to create more of a lively session and get to know our attendees. So I can see math is in the lead, and good for you math people. I admit math and science are not my strong suit, so I'm always very impressed by those who excel in that area. And I also really like the lunch and recess crowd who is maintaining strong in second place. All right, let's move to our next one here. Okay, so our next question is, what age range do your kids fall into? This just helps us and our presenters kind of generally what the range is for people who are joining us on tonight's call. So text 1 for 0 to 3, 2 for 4 to 7, 3 for 7 to 10, 4 for 10 to 13, 5 for 14 to 17, 6 for 18 to 22, and if your kids are above 23, you can text 7. And this question, you can submit as many responses as you have kids that fit into that age range. So don't feel like if you didn't get one, you can't do another one. So I see that most people, it looks like, are within that 4 to 7 range, but we have pretty good representation otherwise, with the exception of that older group, but I would imagine most of those folks are probably beyond school at this point, or perhaps maybe transitioning to independence with higher education at that point. So great. All right, I'm going to move forward with our next question here. Okay, so we're curious to know what type of education platform is your child planning to start this year? So for those who are doing in-person, text 1, 2 for virtual, 3 for a combination of both, a hybrid model, and 4 for I don't know. We know a lot of school systems are still making that decision about what they're going to do. So please let us know. So it looks like majority of folks so far are saying the hybrid model. Great. Thank you all for sharing. This is really helpful and will help our speakers get a better sense for kind of where folks are at and what the experience they're about to embark on. Great. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and move on to our next question. I think we've just got one more here. Looks like another person saying, I don't know, but most people saying, interesting, virtual or the hybrid. And I'm interested that so few people are saying in person. Okay, let's move to the next. Okay, this is going to populate as a word cloud. Please tell us what is one word to describe how you are feeling about the 2021 school year. And I see hot mess is the first thing that popped up. And I think that that is a feeling that probably resonates with many people. Stressed, keep breathing, overwhelmed, yikes. Looks like stressed is our biggest one coming up, concerned, confused. Based on the number of people who still don't know, I can imagine that confused is certainly the way that a lot of people are feeling. So I'll give this just another minute for folks to submit any responses that you have. I'm interested by this one that says juiced on it. I'm not quite sure what that means, but you're welcome to share more in the chat if you'd like. But it definitely seems that stressed and confused are our biggest challenges and feelings that people are sharing here. And thank you very much for sharing this. As I said, it just helps us to get a better sense for where folks are at going into our session. So I also like this, these different characters that I can only assume what that is saying. Great. So I'm really curious to see that juiced continues to grow. So please tell us what that is. Nervous, just keep swimming. Want my kids happy. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen now. And now we'll go ahead and get started with our presentation. As I mentioned before, we've got 3 great panelists who are joining us tonight. For those of you who may have just joined, our format will be that we'll have each of our panelists speak for upwards to 10 minutes to share a little bit about their experiences and perspectives. And then we will turn it over to a Q&A. If you have questions, please submit them via the chat. And Rich and myself will be monitoring that, and we will ask the questions directly to our panelists. If there's a question or something that you want to elaborate on beyond the chat, we're also open for folks to unmute their line. So please let us know if that's something you would like to do. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our first speaker, to Kathy, our school psychologist and familiar face community member. We're so glad to have you, Kathy. Why don't you go ahead and get started? Thank you.
Hey. So many of you who have been to events, especially family camp, you've met me. I'm a mom of an 18, he's now 18, heading off to college. He has hemophilia A moderate. So I've been part of the NEHA community for a long, long time. And the hat I'm wearing tonight, I'm a school psychologist. I work in a school district now. My current place is a preschool through 8th grade. And I've worked actually with from preschool up to age 21. I'm gonna just go ahead and kind of just talk about some suggestions and tips I have and some thoughts on it. And some of that might answer some questions, it might provoke some questions and kind of prompt some of those that come up later. But just, we're all in this really strange, unique, different situation that none of us have ever experienced before. And, there's masks, there's social distancing. We have to stay at home. Some of us don't know. I don't know what our school is doing for a plan yet. And that lack of control, that lack of knowledge is often what contributes to those things that you mentioned before, maybe even juiced, whatever that is. I think that was Brenda Sharp. I'm going to guess that was her. but when we have no control or no knowledge, we can start to feel a lot of different things, and anxious is a big one. We can be anxious about our jobs. Are we going to be able to maintain our jobs while our kids are doing a half day, a couple days a week, or they're home all the time? You know, income, food on the table. Some of you have huge co-pays for life-saving meds, and are you going to be able to afford those meds? The fear of the health. You know, we're concerned about our own health. If we get COVID, our kid gets it, our parents get it. So those are all things that come up. And then when we have anxiety, it can look really different. Some of us just shut down and we're really quiet, we retreat. And there are some who just kind of pace around. They might be kind of like motor is up in high gear. And then there are some like myself, we get really cranky and irritable and even rude, and we're more likely to snap. So tonight I'm hoping to kind of share some ideas that can kind of give us that sense of control and help us to manage some of that a little bit better. And one of the biggest tips, I think, is how we talk to our kids and prep them about this, and how we talk around them. And they look to us and they mimic us and everything that we do. And this is so different for them too. And they might see it on TV, or they might hear their friends, or they're like, why are we staying home? Why are we never going out? And how come everybody's wearing masks now? And it can be scary for them. And they look to us to tell them how to think or feel or act. So if we are saying, I can't believe the school hasn't made a decision yet, or if they expect my kids to stay home, how am I going to go to work? I'm going to lose my job. I'm a single mom. And so they're going to hear all that, and they're going to take that on, and they're going to feel it, and they're going to have anxiety, or they're going to feel defensive about things. So the way that we kind of talk and manage that around them, and how we use our comments around them, is really, really important. Some things that you can say. Your school is working so hard to make sure you and your new friends have a great year. They can't wait to see you and get to know you. You can tell them that we and your teachers will work so hard to keep you safe and healthy. And if they express some fear or they ask questions, validate that. That's normal, and say, yeah, sometimes this can be scary, and sometimes I worry too. What are some things that we can do to manage that? And what are some things we can do to make sure we're safe? And then we also look for parents to be co-educators. You know, we need you to help in making that transition with kids and supporting that creative environment that's conducive to learning, whether they're going to be in school or at home or both. Practice those new expectations for wearing masks and washing hands. There's this thing that's been going around on Facebook, and it's just a little picture of a kid who's playing on his tablet. He's wearing a mask. Have your kids wearing masks, even around the house, not just when they go out to the store. Just have them get used to it. Hey, guess what? We're all going to wear masks right now. We're going to be spending the next hour. Let's set our timers, and we're all going to wear our masks, all of us. Make sure they know how to wash their hands appropriately. And if their school is expecting 6-foot distance, what does that look like? My husband will say something about 150 feet. I have no idea what that is. So little kids often don't even know what 6 feet looks like. They could be 6 inches apart and think that they're doing the 6 feet. Help them to understand what that looks like. Encourage them to cover their mouth when they sneeze and cough, even if they're wearing a mask, because at some point they're going to be taking the mask off to get a drink, to eat. And if they're losing that habit of not needing to cover their mouth when they sneeze or cough anymore because, hey, we've got masks, then they might not remember to do that when they've got their mask off or something. Another important thing is, and this is something I've been thinking about and worrying about, what's going to happen when Joey forgets to put his mask back on? And Susie, forgive the Joeys and Susies out there in the world, but Susie is scared that, she's heard she might bring COVID back home to Grammy and get her really sick, and Grammy could die. So she might be like, Joey, put it on. But we can help them learn, hey, how can you support your friends who might have forgotten? And you might just go, your mask. So help them to be understanding and forgiving and not shaming others, and understanding this is learning. This is something we're all learning. It's new, and we're all in this together, and we're all going to make mistakes, and we're just going to have to support each other. So that's something that parents can do too. I actually have a book, and it's across the room, but when somebody else is speaking, I'm going to go grab it and I can show it to you. It's a book that a friend of mine in a previous district wrote, and it's called Amazing Masks, and it's illustrated, and it goes through, this person wears masks, firemen wear masks, and it talks about raccoons wear masks. painters wear masks, and it kind of normalizes it a lot, and it talks about it. And hey, humans wear masks too. Teachers and students wear masks, and you kind of go through it. But there's some books out there, some social stories too, that are just kind of little stories that talk about why we wear masks, and they're just really, really short. And those can help kids. If with the thing about a social story is you read it repetitively, regularly, until it's kind of built in and the brain gets rewired to normalize that. Sarah has a bunch of resources. I know that some of the questions a lot of people have, like the hardest thing is how to get your kid to do remote learning at home, because in school there's structure. There's a teacher who's used to managing that. There's kids next to them doing the work. So that peer modeling helps a lot. And those are the things that aren't there at home. So one of the best things to do once you figure out what that schedule will be, when your teacher will be checking in, if there's a case manager, a special education case manager, a speech pathologist, an OT, anyone who's going to be checking in with your kid, get that schedule and then kind of write it out and create a schedule for the student, but also build in breaks. It's really important to build those in so the kid knows this break is coming up. And you might find that your kid is working independently on something and the break isn't for another 20 minutes, but if they need it, let them have it, because we do that. I'm writing a report and I get up and I go and walk. I'm like, oh, I wonder if Jackie needs something from me, or I might go visit Ian. I do that, and then I sit back down and my brain is clear. It's really important to help them recognize that. And you might even say, you look like you need a break. Let's set the timer for 5 minutes or 10 minutes. Okay. What do you want to do? And you might even have preset break things. Sarah, if you have that picture and you can add that into the chat.
Yes, I have added it into the chat. It should be it should be just above Carolyn's question. So for folks to access it, you can go ahead and click on the image and it should pop.
So that should be like a little purple and white grid, and it really is about social emotional learning. And these are like skills per grade level or age level for like things like self-awareness. But as you look through there, those actually would be really good brain breaks. So one of the things is draw a picture of yourself and then write things around it about yourself that are good. So those are just good positive brain breaks that actually encourage that growth mindset, so that when they go back to learning, they feel empowered, they feel positive, they feel ready. So that you can use things from that list just to build social emotional skills, but also to use brain breaks. If you can set up a place in your home that is, if you have to work from home, hey, this is my workstation, here's yours. They're going to work, and have your kid help to build that. There were some other thoughts I had that I think they'll probably come up as questions, so I'm going to let those go. So I think that's good for now, and I'm going to pass the baton to Ian or Chris, and people can just ask questions.
Also, I see there are a couple questions that are already coming in, and I want to give you a shout out, Kathy, as well, to someone who said that she loves this list and hopes to use it for herself. So
awesome, good.
It's a great resource. There's some great. I've been taking some notes here as we go along, and I really appreciate the insight, Kathy. I'm going to turn it over to Ian now, who, as a reminder for anyone who is joining us, Ian is a school nurse who works with Kathy at her school, and we're thrilled to have him join NEHA tonight. So go ahead, Ian, you can unmute your line, and please feel free to share an introduction as we get started.
Sure. My name is Ian Riddle, and as has been said before, I work with Kathy at Barnstead Elementary School, K through 8 school, and I'm a nationally certified school nurse, and I've been doing school nursing since 2013. I just wanted to say one thing that I didn't see with the list of words was fatigued. And that's how I feel with COVID-19. My wife runs retirement communities. So she's been up to here with COVID-19, trying to keep it out of her communities. And so far, so good, knock on wood. So this is actually, I'm at my in-laws for the first time since March, and having a little bit of a vacation before school starts. My children are 14 and 16 years old. I've got a junior and a freshman. My junior is a neurotypical overachiever, does really well in school, and she's struggling socially. She misses her friends. So she actually sees a psychologist once a week just to kind of check in and make sure she's doing the right thing and on track. My son has an IEP and case manager. He's got dyslexia, ADHD, and remote learning was an absolute failure for him. And here he is going into a new school, into high school, where he's going to be more independent, or supposed to be more independent. And we don't know what Kathy and I's school is going to look like, but it's going to be some sort of in-person hybrid, most likely. So I'll be pulled back to school, so he's got to take care of himself. So that's pretty much my background and where I've come from. Before I was a nurse, I was a respiratory therapist for 8 years. So one of the questions that came up was about CO2 in the mask. I could talk about that later. But that's my background. And I don't want to get too much into what we should do with school yet, because I'd like to see what the questions are before I get into that. I think following Kathy might be a little bit of a hard act to follow, because I'm not sure what else I should share at this point.
Yeah, Ian, thank you so much for sharing some of your experience and your perspective as a parent as well. I think that's really helpful. Are there some things or guidance, as a school nurse that you are receiving? And I think there were 8% of people who were going in person, and then upwards to 35 of our attendees who said that they would be going for a hybrid model. I'm curious to know, is there certain guidance that you have received for your school? And I realize every school system is very different in how they're handling these. So, just simply some guidance that you might suggest, or even questions that parents should be asking of their school nurses going back into the school system.
Absolutely. Just looking at the different guidances from the federal CDC, for me, it's New Hampshire, the New Hampshire Department of Health, the New Hampshire School Nurse Association. All of those organizations believe that parents should be doing their screening of their children before they leave the house. So not leaving it to the school, because as you can imagine, even though most schools will have staggered start times, because that's one thing that's been recommended. If your school's at half capacity, for us, that would be 250 students. It's hard to just measure people's temperatures, and that's just one thing, and ask them, do you have a sore throat, headache, change of or loss of taste or smell? There's 7 questions. For us, it's have you traveled outside of New England in the past 14 days? And if you have, you're supposed to stay home and self-quarantine for 14 days. And your temperature. So those are the questions that need to be asked. So you should ask your children. You should kind of go through that list, and that list is readily available if you Google it. And the thing the bar is set really low. If you go to the school nurse and you have the sniffles and you have a scratchy throat, if that's not very normal for you, we're going to make a call home, and we're going to have you go home and ask that you be tested. So I guess flexibility is one thing that I would keep in mind. The schools are trying to keep everybody safe. So until we know more about this COVID-19, the bar is set just very low, and things that I would never call a parent for sniffles before this, I'm going to get on the phone and I'm going to be calling parents, your child has got the sniffles. Another thing you might want to do is, if your child does have things like seasonal allergies, make sure you get a doctor's note, send that into school, and that will help. If the pollen count's really high, and you and your child has watery eyes, scratchy throat, sniffles, and you have it on file that you have seasonal allergies, then that helps keep your child there because that's normal for your child at that point. Same for the school, for the teachers and the staff as well. So make sure that you get those notes into the school nurse so that they can kind of use their clinical judgment better than just sending everybody home that might have any small little symptom.
That's great advice. Thank you for sharing that. I hadn't heard the doctor's note, but that makes a lot of sense. And so I'm glad I'm over here kind of furiously writing these notes and things because these will be questions we'll get in the future. So why don't we go ahead and we'll have Chris share a little bit as well. I see some great conversation that's coming up over the chat. So I want to be really mindful that we have a chance to get to some of those questions in addition to the ones that you all submitted in advance. So thank you, Ian, very much. That was great information. And now I want to turn it over to Chris, who is going to share a little bit about his experience as well. And then we'll turn it to the Q&A.
Hi, everybody. So I'm a high school teacher right now. I teach biology of various sorts at Bangor High in Maine. I've also taught at like private schools and charter schools and a parochial school K through 8 building when I was first starting my career. So I have quite a lot of experience. I guess, how long have I been teaching? 23 years. And I've worked with lots of teachers and schools in that time. And I also have 2 sons. One is 12. He's going to be in 7th grade, and he's going to do an online only option versus the hybrid, which is what we selected. And then I also have a 16-year-old who's going to be a junior, and he's actually only taking college courses through the university system this year, all online. So we opted all completely out of our high school environment. And that was because of like course offering limitations in the online setting. And that's what we wanted to do with the kids. My school is unique in the region because Maine has relatively low rates of COVID, that the schools are at their option permitted to do full online or full in-person education, but they need to like find ways to meet the CDC guidelines. And so we've actually switched to block scheduling so that only half the kids we'll only see half as many kids, and it'll be like block scheduling every day, and all of our classes are just a semester. So that's a very big change. And just like Kathy and Ian don't know exactly what type of education they're doing, I don't know a week and a half out from school what classes I'm teaching exactly, or whether I'll have any hybrid sections or online sections. So the most important thing with your teachers is that, to know is that they're teaching probably because they really like teaching and they like kids and they want them to be successful. And so if you kind of approach everything like with being an advocate for your kid, but knowing that this is a person who you probably, their new teacher who you probably don't know well, is in a new situation as well. They're doing their best, and some teachers don't have very much technical savvy, and some of the school districts don't have as many resources available to deliver that online education, or haven't developed it as much. So there's going to be a lot. I think there's just as much. I think if we asked teachers to make a word cloud, their word cloud would look very similar to what your parent word cloud looked like just now. And I know in the meetings I've attended, like there's a pretty high level of anxiety. A lot of teachers really, they want to know what to do. They're very orderly types of things, and they probably thrived in that setting. And so this is it's going to be challenging for them. But if everybody's being challenged, then hopefully it'll make way for everybody to be a little bit more accepting and forgiving. And so my school is sort of known in the region for being pretty rigid in the way that it does things. But it's really gone out of its way to be extremely flexible in this situation, and the same with my son's school. And so I think if there's like, if your student is struggling, like just, advocate for them early and often, and touch bases with your teacher, find out how they're going to be delivering the expectations right away. And where there are so many students that really struggle, like Kathy was saying, when you take them out of that like peer environment where it's very orderly and you have clear expectations every day and outside sort of like reinforcement of getting things done, take whatever that online delivery method is, and I'd encourage you, if you have a student that struggles like that, to actually move it into the real world and have that be part of their process, that they take those assignments and actually like write them down. Just like if the teacher had written them on the board, that wouldn't be the only place you'd want them. Have them still use a planner and make lists of assignments, and maybe even like try and guess how long, make it a game. How long will this take? How quick can I get through it? And it really is very important, I think, to remember that, so that really like good enough is good enough, and like I have like my oldest is a very, high performer. He wants to do everything. He wants to do it perfect. And we're just like, you don't have the resources you normally have. You don't have the backup. So just give yourself permission to just do enough. And, that can be really hard for some people, and other people, like, it's just like, do something, right? Like I had students go from like literally 100% students in a top level AP course to like, they just disappeared. They couldn't get anything done. And I'd email them, they'd be like, oh yeah, I'll get it. But then they just couldn't. They couldn't make their brain do it. So, even if they just get like something done, just, that blank canvas can be so overwhelming. When I was in school, I had an art teacher, and we'd be sometimes nervous to start drawing, and she would actually take our hand and she'd put some paint, she'd push our hand into the canvas and make us mark on the canvas and just get them started. And I tell my students that a lot of times when they're doing projects and things like that, just put anything on there, just get anything started, and you're on your way to getting it done, because it can be so overwhelming. But yeah, transfer things. My biggest advice is just stay in contact with your teacher, figure out how that information is going to be, delivered, and then transfer it to the real world. And then if they struggle with like that accountability, just have them just begin anything and try and make it like a game. Try and give them, empower them to really sort of, get it done either as fast as possible or as fun as possible. And, if your kids are like my kids, take away this doesn't work on the teenager that well anymore, but like take away their electronic privileges, for fun as best as you can. It's hard because you can't turn the router off because they need that to do their work now. But like make that like the reward. The us teachers, we really are going to need your support at home. Students are wildly different in the classroom than they are with their family. And, sometimes like I'll be like, oh, they're so nice and polite, and their parent is like, what? That's not my kid, or vice versa sometimes, so, you know how to work with your student at home, hopefully, and if not, this is, that's the process, is to figure out how to get them to engage and stay engaged. And like Kathy said, don't over engage so that they just like lose it and get too into it where they just break down. So those brain breaks are really important for older students and younger students, probably equally so. and try and encourage them to stay active physically and to stay active socially in whatever way you think is appropriate. Somebody asked about pods. We're actually doing, like, my family is doing a pod with our 7th grader with 3 or 4 other families that are doing either homeschool or online options. And so, you know, the kids actually love like Zooming with each other. And they'll, like, my son like chats with his friend and watches like YouTube videos, like watching them separately at home, and they're like talking, and, you know, and, or they're playing Minecraft. So like, that's good. It's better than nothing. And that social activity is super important for kids. And that's, you know, sometimes work to get them to go out there and do that. So, you know, I guess that's about, I don't know if that's 10 minutes. I have no idea, but that's about what I have to say at this point. And then if there are any other questions, I'm happy to address those.
That's great. Thank you, Chris. That was all really helpful information. I think one thing that really resonated with me too is thinking about the importance of, you know, kind of using this experience as a learning opportunity outside of traditional academics. You know, I'm kind of thinking about my own school experience and, you know, learning how to practice better time management and be more proactive with assignments and whatnot. And I think, you know, those opportunities are just as important as the academic learning that comes as well, especially for, you know, older kids as they think about what comes next, whether it be college or whatever kind of independence they transition to. So I think that's a great point. I love the idea of encouraging kids to use a planner and other things that would be useful for them to maintain better organization and communication. So all really helpful points. So lots of questions coming in and ones that were submitted through Zoom previously. There was a question that just came through in the chat that I think I'll start with because I know that each of you has experience in this particular area. So the person asks, our school system is a hybrid model. My son had an IEP. How do we honor and stick to that in a virtual world? And you all have great experience in this area. So I would say if one of you wants to choose to respond to this one, I know both Chris and Kathy have done sessions on IEPs in the past, so maybe we can start there. And Ian, feel free to weigh in on this as well.
So I'll jump in, and Chris, you can add, or Ian, add anything that you, that what I say triggers and that you want to add on to it. I would say you can go ahead and request a meeting with the staff and the case manager and the LEA of the school, just to ask questions like, okay, how is this going to work for my kid, and how are the services going to be provided? I think some of those questions that you have are still being worked out, and that they may not have those answers of what it's going to look like. But I know that in the discussions we're having as related service providers in my school, we are figuring out how we can still meet those, the hours that we've put into the IEP, because that's what kids need. So we want to make sure that we give it, but how are we going to be able to do that? And I think, so one of our problems is, I think you said you were going to be hybrid. So one of the things is if you have language or counseling in a group, but these kids have to be 6 feet apart and we don't always have that space, how do you do that in a group? And how are we going to be able to still provide through services through a group? Or do we try to go individual, and can we fit that into everybody's schedule? So that's all being worked out. But you could just say, you know, if I can have any input or if I can be of any help in that discussion, let me know. But I would say trust that they're working on this, and we're all trying to make sure that it happens, and it will. It's just going to be a little bit different, maybe. How do we stick in a virtual world? A lot of times the services can still be provided through virtual, and I don't know if they did that for you in the spring, but that's what we were doing a lot of. Hopefully that helps.
That's great. And Chris and Ian, feel free to weigh in here too if you would like to share anything from your experiences.
I think I would just say that we were thrown into this last March, and I saw from March through June that we got better and better at it. And I think we've had the summer, and teachers have had the summer to kind of think about how they would change things. So I foresee all of the different models looking different September than they did last spring. So I think from the meetings that I've attended, the teachers, the academic counselors are thinking outside of the box, and they've come up with some really good things that they wouldn't have come up with six months ago. I think the education system is gonna move, whether teachers liked it or not, and it's gonna be for the better, I think, when we come out of this on the other side.
Thank you, Ian, for sharing that. Oh, go ahead, Chris.
Just the only thing that I would add quickly is that, you know, you might, like, whatever's in your IEP, if you think you need different accommodations in an online setting compared to an in-person one, there, you know, those probably aren't in there right now. In Maine, they pretty much, like, I don't, they just sort of like auto renewed the IEPs last year. So, you know, don't be afraid to call up and advocate and say, hey, I need my IEP to say this, I need this accommodation because my kid doesn't do any work at home. So I'm going to need, you know, either reduced work or, you know, more time or whatever, something modified. So don't be afraid to ask and advocate. Super important idea.
Thanks for sharing that, Chris. And I see there's some great stuff happening in the chat. Diane, thanks for your comments there. And, you know, Chris, you brought up a great point about the homeschooling and the pods and, you know, providing socialization where you're able to, whether it be virtual or in person. And you know, Diane brings up a great point about some of the things that they've done. And I see Carolyn is offering to connect her kids. And that reminds me too, you know, within this community, there's a lot of tight-knit families, and we also have some new families who I'm sure would be interested to get to know other kids. So, you know, I think, you know, continuing to use one another as a resource for that socialization during a time when kids might not be seeing their friends could be another great way to connect folks. So I'm going to direct this next question to Kathy. Somebody asked prior to the session tonight, how do we get kids to be in school mode at home? What is more important, getting work done or a happy home?
First, a happy home, because if it's not a happy home, they're not going to get the work done. So do make that your focus and then try to find a balance. I'm looking back at some of my notes that I was making through here. I think involving them in the planning, like, hey guys, we're going to set up school here. You might even take them shopping and get, you know, maybe some of those whiteboards that they write on, help them pick out some of the stuff and create that desk setting that they're working at, but also try, if your home will allow this, try to create a cozy corner too. Like if you were to walk into some of the little kids' classrooms, or even actually in some of the middle school or some high school classrooms might have this, there might be just what they call flexible seating. And it might just be like a rug area or some different seating that the kids can just kind of lounge and hang and read or do their work. If you create that, they might be drawn to that area and more likely to do the work, but just sitting at a desk for so long and doing it is tough. Build in those brain breaks, but also you can use some of the brain breaks, pulling in what Chris was saying about the social time. Work out with their friend's parent when they might have a shared break time, and that's when they connect, and they might, you know, spend 10, 15 minutes or whatever they need regularly to do that. And that's their social connection that can happen and be built in. I think just involving your kids in the planning, asking questions. If you're working from home, you could say, hey, I'm going to be working. This is what I need. And this is part of like what Ross Green, the collaborative problem solving that I referred to in there too. He does this as part of his negotiating and working with kids. I need blah, blah, blah. What do you need? and they might not be able to name it, but you can kind of help them get through it by asking questions. Okay, so you need this and I need this. How can we come together to do this? And then the trick is you don't tell them. If they don't have an idea, you can say, I have an idea. Would you like to hear? And the trick is you're getting their permission, and getting their permission rather than telling them, well, here's what I think we should do. They're more likely to buy into it. It just kind of opens that part of the brain. So problem solving together, and you're going to have to revisit it. Something that's going to work one day, 1 week might not work the next, or you might discover something that wasn't a problem then, now has kind of surfaced because something's changed. So revisit it together. Hey, let's have a meeting. I've noticed this, you've noticed that. What can we do?
That's great. And going back to kind of that theme of teaching life skills, things that will benefit kids not only, to during this time, but will also be beneficial in the future. I think especially problem solving skills. That's a great suggestion, Kathy.
And the other thing I just want to add is don't expect that you're going to be successful like the teacher. Like Chris and I have said, it is a very different environment. You got to cut yourself some slack. It's just not going to go perfectly at home the full time. If you were a homeschool teacher and you had a lot of experience behind that, but you're thrown into this situation. So give yourself a break.
That's a great suggestion. Thank you.
Oxygen mask too.
Yeah.
For yourself.
Yeah, that helps. I know. Yeah, maybe we'll have a parent session after this on tips for coping. So kind of going off of the trend of working from home, somebody also submitted a question. I'm working from home. How do we make this work for my kid with special needs if and when we go virtual again? Ian, I wonder if you might be willing to share some of your own experience with this question, and Kathy and Chris, if there's anything you'd like to add afterward, please feel free to do so.
That's a difficult question because if you're working from home, you need to get your work done, and your special needs child needs help. So I think the theme that I've heard here tonight is allow yourself to have a break. I saw in the questions as well, somebody said, I'm worried my child is going to fall behind. Well, the whole world is in the same boat. So the whole world is going to probably stall a little bit where they wouldn't before. So always keep that in the back of your mind, that nobody's in this alone, and that you have to advocate for yourself, put on your own oxygen mask. I think it was Kathy was saying, when disaster happens on an airplane, make sure you put your mask on first before you help somebody else with theirs. So I'm not sure if I'm answering your question or not, but just make sure that you understand that you're not alone. The whole world is doing the same thing, and that you don't have to be perfect, and you have to, kind of take care of yourself and your child and be an advocate for them.
I think that's great. And I'll actually put a plug in to Kathy, for anyone who missed this earlier, sent us a great resource list that has a ton of different information, really kind of spans a wide array of tips and resources for families. So we'll send that out to the attendees, and we'll have that available on NEHA's website as well. So that will be just another resource that might be able to provide more for you on these questions here, especially if we're not able to get to something. So thank you, Ian, for that. That was great. I'm going to go ahead and move to another question. I see one came through the chat too, so we'll make sure to get to that. Chris, I've got a couple questions in here that I'm going to combine together. Somebody asks, how do we keep our kids engaged on remote days when there's no contact from the teachers? And going along with that, any tips or advice for supporting young learners who would be attending school remotely?
I mean, kind of everybody's different, right? Like, so there's no one secret way to keep kids engaged. I would, like I said earlier, encourage people to, make sure that they have a physical list or written on a whiteboard or something of what they're supposed to accomplish that day. And a lot of times there's like online learning platforms with some accountability. From some districts, it might be worksheets, you know, and so like having the kid, the student make, you know, have some buy-in and actually like come up with their schedule, and, you know, own it. You know, you can't make them want to do it. You can sort of set an expectation, but kind of like what Kathy was saying earlier, you know, the best thing you can do is get them to buy in, to engage. And so even if they don't like bite on the whole thing right away, say, well, which one do you want to do? You know, which one's the easiest, or which one do you think will be the most fun? And so just get them talking about anything regarding that work, you know, so that they start processing, which one am I most looking forward to, which one am I not? And then they start to have, you know, engagement with it. And, you know, hopefully it's something more exciting than worksheets. You know, if you can have them sit with you at some point, or, you know, make an area, you know, and it's really just going to be trial by error. And, you know, it really is like, this is a huge opportunity for students to learn to be independent learners and learn what works for them. And obviously the younger they are, the harder that is to individually, you know, like to own that type of, you know, sort of soft skill, like, you know, how to be accountable. So, you know, reward systems can be very effective with some students, even if it's like money, or candy, or video game times, or like that they get some reward after completing X number of whatever. And, you know, the trick with a reward is it has to be small and achievable, right? Like if it's too big, like if at the end of the quarter you did this, like that doesn't mean anything to them, especially if they struggle with focusing. You know, they need something like today, what will happen at the end today, you know, even if it's like a star, and when you get 5 stars you get the thing, you know. But then if they do something that like cost them the star, then they're like, well, I'm done because I can't get that star today, so like I already blew it, you know. So, you know, just ways to have second chances, and just everything is an opportunity, and, you know, just use it as a time to connect with your kid if you can, you know, like have conversations with them. And if they don't do it, it's not probably the end of the world. You know, I mean, they got to do something eventually, but like on any one day, it's okay, you know, like that didn't work. And hopefully the teacher will understand that. I guess the part I really probably don't know much about, maybe Kathy has some better ones, is strategies for the really young kids, you know, like kindergartners and stuff, you know. And in the end, like those guys, like they're very resilient, like they're not going to fall that far behind, they're going to catch right up. And like Ian said, everybody's falling behind. So, you know, keeping them happy and moving forward and, you know, positive about school and learning is the most important thing with those guys. So that's what I got on those questions.
Awesome. Can I tag on to that, Sarah? Because I told you, you're right. I like to talk. I think do not be surprised if they resist. If they just hit the wall and they're trying to exert control, because this is so out of the bounds of their norms, that they are going to seek control in some way. And this may be one way, like, no, I'm not doing it. And so one of the tricks of a teacher is if then, and just being very firm. If you do this, then you get this. And they're going to fight it. If you do this, then you get this. Just keep saying it, but try to modulate the tone. Even give them a kiss, like, mwah, I love you. If you do this, then you get that. And just let them know that's what it is. That's the boundary. Don't engage in the battle. They're going to fight. Just don't even go there. Just if, then, and stick with that. there was something Chris said that I was like nodding. I'm like, yeah, you're right. Oh yeah, just calling it a day. Sometimes you're just going to have to call it a day. And you just communicate with the teacher, the case manager, whoever, whoever, the whole team, wrap around and just say, today went to beep, and we're going to try again tomorrow. Do you have suggestions for us? Here's what happened. They know your kid a lot of times. Or they know other teachers in the building who know your kid, and they can kind of figure it out and give some advice, or they just have been there with other kids. And so rely on them. Don't be afraid to communicate and get advice from them.
That's great. Thank you, Kathy, for sharing that. I know we've got more questions than we probably have time for, so I'm going to try to get through as many as I can, especially from the ones that were submitted in advance. We did, just as a kind of heads up for folks who may have asked a question related to COVID and a bleeding disorder, any medical questions, we would ask that you please reach out to your HTC or your medical care provider, if it's not through an HTC, to please have that conversation with them. We certainly appreciate folks submitting questions in advance, but we want to make sure that you've got the right people to be able to provide the resources for you on those questions that you may have in the guidance that you are seeking. So just wanted to share that for anyone who may have asked a question that we haven't had a chance to get to. So Kathy, I want to ask you, a question came in through the chat. They said, what do you do when your child is terrified about going anywhere in public spaces? Do they have PTSD?
Ta-da. I don't know that I would call it PTSD right now. That's typically about the fear of dying, or I guess there is some of that, but it's prolonged over time. I would say it's pretty anxiety based. And if you look at it in that manner, having conversations with them about what are they afraid of, they may not even be able to identify it. They may not even be able to name it. But is one of the things I said in the thread is name it to tame it. That's a big phrase we use in our school, is when you know what the issue is, then you can figure out how to fix it. But misbehavior is just, for example, is just, it doesn't really tell you what the lagging skill is or what the problem is. I don't know, this is a really tough one, because it might be that they can't read facial expressions on people and they don't know what people are thinking. It could be that they're afraid of getting sick. It's without knowing what that fear might be, have some stories, do some books. The book I was going to tell you about, by the way, this one, Amazing Books, written by Jennifer Brock. So it's just got big pictures of who wears masks and stuff, and it normalizes it, and pigeons wear masks, and it goes, oops, no, they don't. So it uses a little humor, but find some books, find some social stories that might help with that, and then just see if you can get any progression there. And if not, if it's a school-age child, reach out to the school and talk to them and see if they can provide some support.
Great, thank you for sharing that, Kathy. If you don't mind, I'm not sure if you've already done this, but just maybe putting that book into the chat as a resource. It sounds like something that people might be interested in.
Yeah, I'll find a link.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. So Ian, I'm going to direct this next question at you. I'll paraphrase the beginning of this. You may have seen it in the chat. A mom of a severe hemophiliac who works in a school as a one-on-one LNA with a nurse. And I just want to give a shout out about how amazing school nurses are and the workload that you have. She asks, are you seeing any plans that could help make things run more smoothly for school nurses, especially, you mentioned earlier about how, as a school nurse, you are going to be so much more vigilant, and, the threshold is really low. So any additional things that any resources or things that will help you, the process run smoother for you as a school nurse?
One thing that I have been developing over the summer, we have a school nurse application that we document things in, and just like a doctor's office, it has a health portal. So I'm hoping this year that parents are going to use that a lot more, and I think that's going to help streamline things so that we don't have to shuffle paperwork as much. So I'm not sure if your school uses this particular one's called SNAP, School Nurse Application, and it works with our Power School, the management software for the teaching part. They don't speak directly to each other, but it pulls data from one to the other. Just looking for ways to automate things. You're going to be pulled in a million different directions, and you have to kind of prioritize one thing, communicate as much as you can. Give the administration a heads up. If you see things are going sideways, let them know, because and that's just good thing to do anyway. I always want, if I have an angry parent on the phone, I make sure that I beeline it to the principal or assistant principal and let them know they want to hear it from me first before they hear it from the parent. Hopefully that answers some of your questions. It's again, put your oxygen mask on yourself before you help others. Come up with ways to make your life a little easier.
Great, thank you for sharing that, Ian. There was a question that you had spoken about earlier, Ian, that I just wanted to refer back to about someone asked about the effects of wearing a mask and breathing in carbon dioxide on clotting. Do you mind just sharing what you had shared earlier? And again, this might be a question for an HTC specifically to verify kind of what the guidance is there.
I always laugh and say that the internet's a wonderful thing. It's the information superhighway, but it's also the misinformation superhighway. And I don't know how masks became political. They do work. It's called source control, and we used it for I've been doing this for 25 years, and 25 years ago, if we had a patient with tuberculosis, that patient wore a mask, and you wore a mask as well, and that knocked down the amount of pathogen in the air. I mean, people act like it's new. It's not. So when you're wearing a mask and you're inhaling and exhaling, the mask doesn't have a large reservoir. So the same amount of, it's the bottom line, without getting too technical, it's the same amount of CO2 wearing a mask as if you didn't have a mask. And it's the anatomy of your windpipe and your oral pharynx. And when you exhale, you have a certain amount of CO2 there, and then you start to inhale and bring in fresh air from the outside. So there is no increase in CO2 with a cloth mask.
Great, thank you for sharing that. We appreciate it, Anne. So I'll move to a couple other questions. There was a question that came in about college kids that I will ask. So I will get to that, but I just finished with some of our questions for some younger kids. Somebody asks that they mentioned that they have shy kids, and without getting to know their teachers through the in-person setting, they're concerned about their participation no longer being active. And so I'm wondering, or she's wondering, are there any suggestions on helping kids get over social anxiety in a virtual setting? And Kathy, I wonder if maybe this one would be a good one for you to start with.
So I read Diane's question, and then I went and pulled up this attachment that's in there now. I just added it. I hope it goes through. It's my COVID ER plan, and the ER is actually emotional regulation. And so this is something that is meant to be used for problem solving, for remote learning. And so if, trying to pull it up now. So it lists your concerns. Here's what it looks like when I'm stressed out. So helping them to name it and what might their triggers be. And then there's some challenges, and then signs. So what it might look like when they're feeling stressed, what we might notice. And then it goes to support. So what might help them doing work at their own pace, and parent support, more time with their teacher one-on-one. Definitely without that physical connection with kids, that is a struggle and to know how to navigate speaking up online around some friends. I think that's definitely a challenge for some. So Diane, you could try using something like that, and you know, you can just adapt it for their ages, but you could just use it to start a conversation in what might work. And again, just kind of that problem solving strategy or model. Talking to their teachers in letting them know, and so they can find ways to go through that too, because they're going to be aware of it and they're going to be figuring out how to make this work for kids too. So I hope that helped, Diane. I love your kids.
Thank you for sharing that. And I see she says thank you in the chat. So awesome. So why don't we finish off on this question, unless there's anything else that comes through the chat. We'll give folks a minute to be able to share any final thoughts that you have. Somebody asked the question about considerations for college kids. Kathy, I'm wondering if you want to take this one, because this is something that I know you are in the thick of yourself. And Ian, if you have other, you have thoughts to weigh in here as well, please feel free to.
I'm not sure what the question is asking, because I have found in my experience of getting my son ready for college, you jump over one hurdle and you've got two more in front of you. And the colleges are changing their plans as they go. And my son's going to Connecticut, and they have one plan, and then the state changes it in based on numbers or what's happening in colleges in other states. So you think you've got a plan, and then it's changing. And I think flexibility is what's needed. So I'm not sure really what's being asked there. I apologize for that.
Looks like a follow-up question came in.
Oh, Ziva, okay.
COVID-specific considerations if or when the kid is in the college dorm. And Ian, I noticed that you unmuted your line there too. Let me give you a chance to weigh in, and Kathy, if there's anything else you want to contribute.
Ian.
You know, the big thing is don't party. Continue being safe. You know, there's a lot of kids that think they're immortal and they want to have the college experience. Wait until there's a vaccine to have that college experience. You know, be reserved, practice social distancing. It's difficult. Make sure that you agree with the personality of the person that's in your dorm, especially if you have dorm mates. You know, even before COVID, there were horror stories of people just not getting along with their dorm mates, and it's absolutely more important now. You don't want to come back to your dorm and find 15 kids sitting in your bed. You know, just be diligent, practice safe COVID-19 practices, and your time will come. But don't. I live in Durham, New Hampshire, the town of UNH, and we're already seeing kids, you know, 30, 40, 50, 100 on one front lawn at one of the sororities of frat houses. And they're going to close the school down because it's just going to be the virus is real, and it's highly transmittable, and we know how to stay safe. And it's wear a mask, watch your distance, wash your hands, and that's the mantra we need to keep going, to keep up with.
Thank you, and that's great. That's great advice. And I think I see a few more things coming in about it's a good time to have an introvert as a college kid. I suppose definitely with that, with some of that socialization aspect of college. And I know, Kathy, it looks like you're weighing in a bit on the chat. So that's great advice. And just any other thoughts on handling a frustrated teen who doesn't want to be at home? I'll throw that out there, and then we'll wrap up shortly.
First, validate. I think that's the best, to like invalidate by saying, but you know, you could have this, it could be so much worse. Other people have it worse than you. Validate. This stinks. This is awful. And I'm so sorry that this is your life right now. And if I could make it better, I would. So what are some things that we can focus on? What are some things that are in our control that we can change? And actually, maybe even looking at that, the purple thing, the purple and white grid, there might be some things in there to help to kind of use the growth mindset. It stinks. It really, really stinks. Their senior year and now the start of freshman college. Not at all what they expected or dreamed.
The term "this sucks" has been said a lot in the Riddle household.
Yeah.
Validated. It does. There's nothing good about this.
So he does not want to be home, Ziva, but he is going to be, it sounds like. That's tough because he's probably ready to spread his wings and go.
At this point, I have two teenagers, right? I've got a high school freshman and a college freshman. I would say of the two of them, yeah, Shai's ready to be in the dorm. This is a lousy time to be a kid with asthma, you know? Like, it's just a lousy time to be a college freshman. Because, yeah, he's totally ready to spread his wings.
You know what I've seen some people do? They decorate their kids, redecorate the bedroom as if it's a dorm room. Make it a dorm room.
Brilliant, especially since I actually bought the dorm room gear.
Make it a dorm room, even if you're putting a little mini fridge in there. Give him his dorm space.
Okay, but he better wash his own dishes.
Maybe he will.
Okay, all right.
Maybe Ziva, really give him the full experience by cooking him cafeteria style. He'll feel really at home. Just don't allow him to have a hot plate in his dorm room, because then that's where things get difficult.
Don't put
And
a
a
keg
fire
in the corner.
extinguisher.
Yeah.
And a keg. And I don't think
No
Shai
keg
would
in
be
the
doing
corner.
that.
Oh, good. Well, thank you, Ziva, for sharing that, and thank you, Kathy, as well. You know, we appreciate the information sharing, and I think, you know, especially within this community, there's so much shared experience, you know, coming together as people who have a bleeding disorder, but also with kids who are in similar places, similar experiences. So, you know, the ability to connect with others, you know, whether it be through forums like this or, you know, through some of the different means people have mentioned in the chat, connecting kids even through video games or whatnot, you know, whatever it is that is impactful for you and your family. I hope that this is one step in helping you be able to provide more socialization and more of the experience that your kids may have been receiving if they were in person at school. And so kind of on that trend, I just want to share, several of you offered tips when you registered for the session of ways that you are able to do kind of tips and tricks for distance learning at home. So there were some good ones on here that I thought I would share with the group, because I think information sharing is a great way for us to help get, you know, through this time. So take a look at this list, and hopefully it will be beneficial for you. And as I've shared a few times, but just to reiterate one more time, we will have a resource list that we'll distribute from Kathy. We'll also have this available as a recording. If there are resources that NEHA can provide to you and your families as you continue to experience these challenging times, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We are committed to providing the same education, advocacy as we always do, whether it be in person or online. NEHA is here for you. You have a huge community here for you as well. And so please know that, that if you're facing an experience, a challenging time, you've got a whole army of support backing you. So I'll just close by saying again, thank you so much to our speakers, to Kathy, Ian, and Chris for giving their time. And I will just also give a huge shout out to educators and teachers for the incredible work that you do, not just during COVID times, but throughout your careers as educators. You know, teachers deserve all the praise in the world for the work that you do in the best times and the most challenging times. So as administrators and as supporters in the school system, just a huge thank you for your dedication to kids. So with that, we'll close out. Just a reminder that NEHA is continuing to put information on our COVID resource page, which is accessible through the homepage. We are going to start our webinar Wednesday series, Wednesdays at 7 p.m. beginning in September. So stay tuned to social media and to your email for more information on what the schedule will look like. We've got lots of great education coming up. In addition to many events, we've got our walk coming up in September, and golf tournament and other things coming up. So the learning and will continue well into the fall and beyond that. So again, thanks everyone for being on tonight. Thanks for staying late. And I hope everyone has a great school year, whatever that will look like. Best of luck to you all, and don't hesitate to reach out if you need anything. Take care. Good night, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ian. Thanks, Kathy. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you. Bye.